We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Dalet Amud Beis Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 34b. On the previous summer, there was a machlokas amoraim between Reish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan. Let's say a person offers a chaya, a wild animal, a kosher wild animal, as a korban. Is that accepted or not? Reish Lakish said that it would be accepted. It would not be disqualified. And the Gemara is in the middle of bringing a brisa against Reish Lakish. The brisa concludes upasel. It's talking exactly about our case, a case of bringing a chaya as a korban, and the brisa concludes that it is in fact disqualified, and the Gemara says tiyufta de Reish Lakish. Is this a tiyufta? Is this a refutation of Reish Lakish? And the Gemara says indeed tiyufta, it is a refutation. And the Gemara continues with the two dots. The Mishnah said v'chulon shekiblu v'chulu. All of these individuals who are puzzled to do the avoda, if they receive the blood and they have the intent outside of the proper time or outside of the proper place, so then if there is soul blood remaining in the animal, then the kabbalah should be done again properly. And the Gemara says, Boy minei Reish Lakish me Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan the following question. Pasul ma'u sheyasi shirayim. Let's say a pasul person, someone who's disqualified from doing the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, and he goes ahead and he does it. Does he create shirayim? Shirayim means leftover or remainder, which essentially means that any blood that remains in the animal would actually be disqualified. You wouldn't be able to use that blood to try to correct what was done before. Rashi explains, Pasul ma'u sheyasa shirayim. Again, a disqualified individual, does he create shirayim? Mishahu pasul le'avodah. Again, we're talking here about somebody who's disqualified from doing the avodah. Ma'u sheyasa shirayim. It means im kibel v'zorak. Let's say he received the blood and threw the blood. Ma'u sheyachzor hakosher v'yakabel v'yizrok. Now can a kosher person go ahead and do it again? He'll receive other blood and throw it v'yichshor hakarban, and then the korban will be kosher. Mi amrinon, do we say kevan dezorak pasul, since the person who did the zrika was disqualified, shavyo ledam shebetzavor shirayim. So now he has rendered the blood in the neck shirayim. It's considered to be remainder. V'sulo michzi lezrika, and once it's shirayim, you can't use it for zrika anymore. Oh, Dilmor, maybe lo alima zrikas pasul. It is not strong enough, the zrika of a disqualified person, l'shavya ledam shebetzaver behema shirayim, to render the blood in the neck of the animal shirayim, v'yachzor hakosher v'yakabel. And if that's the case, then a kosher person is allowed to go ahead again and do a kabbalah sadam. That's the question of the Gemara. And the Gemara continues, Amar Lei said to him, Ein osa shirayim el chutz lezmano v'chutz lemekomo. The gears of the Bach is Ein lach zrika osa shirayim. A zrika does not create shirayim unless the zrika was done with intention, chutz lezmano or chutz lemekomo. Hoel u'meratza lepigulo. Since that kind of zrika is accepted at a certain level, it's accepted to render the korban pigul. So that's considered a quote-unquote real zrika, which renders shirayim. But otherwise, let's say a disqualified person, that's not going to create shirayim. Rashi explains, Ein lach zrika psula she'oses hashar shirayim. You don't have a disqualified zrika that would render the rest shirayim. Ela zrika b'machsheves chutz lezmano v'chutz lemekomo. Only a zrika with an intention outside of the proper time, outside of the proper place. Hoel umeratza lepigulo, since it's accepted as far as pigul. Hoel v'hav zrika min haTorah lemikvei pigul upasul. Since again it's a zrika midoraisa that it renders, it establishes it as pigul, and it is disqualified. And so again, that's going to be the only case where we are going to say that it creates shirayim. And the Gemara continues, Rav Zavid Masni Hachi. Rav Zavid taught the above a little different. He taught it as follows. Boy minei Reish Lakish me Rabbi Yochanan. That Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan the following question. Kos pasul. Let's say you have a disqualified cup. Ma'u sheyasa shirayim. Does that create shirayim? Rashi explains, Kos pasul kagon sheyotza. For example, let's say you had a cup of blood, and it was received blood that left the area, that left the proper place. So ma'u sheyasa ledam shebetzaver shirayim. Now, would it render the blood that remains in the neck shirayim? Im zarku kohen kosher lazeh. Let's say a kohen who was kosher ended up throwing this pasul blood that was in this disqualified cup. V'lo yehi takana lekorban she'achzir v'kabel. And if it does create shirayim, again there would be no solution for the korban. You wouldn't be able to do the Kabbalah again. So that was the question Reish Lakish asked Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Lei said to him, what are you asking that for? Pasul gufe my svirulach. What do you hold about an individual who's pasul? I pasul mashvi shirayim. If you hold a disqualified person creates shirayim, so kos pasul nami mashvi shirayim. So a cup that's disqualified also will create shirayim. And I pasul lo mashvi shirayim. If a disqualified person does not create shirayim, kos pasul nami lo mashvi shirayim. So kos pasul as well will not create shirayim. Rashi explains, Pasal Gufei Maisvirlach, what do you hold about an Adam Pasal Shazarak, a person who's disqualified who threw the blood, Maisvirlach Beshirayim Shabetzavra Behema, what do you hold there by the remainder that's in the neck of the animal, to Lokami Boilach, that you didn't ask that question. And so essentially the answer is, whatever the answer is in terms of a Pasal, that's going to be the answer as well in terms of Kos Pasal. And the Gemara continues, Rav Yirmiyah Midifti Masni Hachi, Rav Yirmiyah Midifti, he had the above discussion, again, different version, he taught as follows, Boy Minei Abaya Me Rabba, Abaya asked Rabba the following question, Kos Mao Sheyases Chavero Dichoy O Shirayim. Let's say you have a cup, does it create that the other cup is considered a Dichoy, which literally means it's pushed off, or is it considered to be Shirayim? Rashi explains the question, Kos Mao Sheyases Chavero Dichoy O Shirayim, Kagon Chatos, for example, let's say you have a carbon Chatos, Shakibel Dama Bishnei Kosos, let's say they received the blood, the person received the blood with 2 cups. V'nasan kol matanosav me'echad mehen. And all of the applications of the blood were given from 1 cup. So what's going to be the halacha chavero shirayim? And in one possibility is that the other cup is considered a remainder. Now, if it's considered shirayim, the halacha by shirayim is benishbach liyasod, that then it's poured to the base of the mizbeach. T'chsiv as kol adam yishbach. That's what it says in the pasuk. O dichoy. The other possibility is it's called dichoy, means dachia biyadayim. It's like been pushed off actively. Shalonitan mimenu al hakarnos, because it wasn't used to apply to the corners of the mizbeach. Now, if it's considered dichoy, then v'yishbach la'ama shabi azara, then it's going to be poured into the amma and the azara. Essentially, that was the drain. Hamotzia damim lenachal kidron, and that drain would bring the blood to nachal kidron, to the stream of kidron. So those are the 2 possibilities within this question. Again, whether it's considered dichoy or shirayim. And to that, the Gemara continues, Amar Lei said to him, Pluksod Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan. That issue is actually a machlokas tanoim between Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanan. Titania, as we learned in a brisa, Lamala hu omer, above it says, Es damo yishbach, that he's going to pour the blood. And Lamata hu omer, below it says in the pasuk, V'yas kol dama yishbach, it says all of the blood. So it's a discrepancy, the blood, or is it all of the blood? And we understand as follows, Minayin l'chatas shakibel dama bi'arba kosos, from where do we know if you have a carbon chatas, and the blood was received in 4 cups? V'nosan matana achas mizeh, umatana achas mizeh. You put one of the applications from this cup, one from this cup, meaning you're going to use, let's say you used all of the cups for the application of the blood. Shekulan, so how do we know that all of them, nishpochen liyasod, that they're all poured to the yasod of the mizbeach in that scenario? Talmud lomar v'yas kol dama yishpoch. There it says again, kol dama yishpoch. Since it says kol dama yishpoch, that means it's poured to the yasod. Those are cases where it's considered to be shirayim. Now, Yachol Nasan Arba Matanos Mikos Echad. One might think, let's say he did all 4 applications of blood from 1 cup. Maybe you would think there also, Yehu Kula Nishbachan Liyasod. Maybe you would think over there also that all of them are poured to the Yasod of the Mizbeach. Talmud Lomar V'yas Damo. The pasuk says V'yas Damo, it doesn't say Kol Damo. And so Haketzad Hausa, what do you do in that case? Hu Nishbach Liyasod. If you only used 1 cup, then the remainder in that cup, that's Shirayim, you pour it to the Yasod of the Mizbeach. Ve'hein Nishbach in the Amma, but the rest of them, they get poured down the drain to the Amma, because those are considered to be dachi b'yadayim. They were pushed off actively. And the Brisa continues with another opinion. As we said, this issue is a machlokas tanoim. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon says, Minayin l'chatas shekibel dama bi'arba kosas. From where do we know that a carbon chatas, where the blood was received in 4 cups, v'nosan dalin matanos mikos echad, and all 4 applications were done from 1 cup. So according to Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, shekula nishbachan liyasod, they're all poured to the yasod of the mizbeach. They're all considered shirayim. Talmud lomer v'yas kol dama yishbach. Again, it says all of the blood. Now, according to Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, v'aksiv as dama yishbach. What does he do with the pasuk that's written v'yas dama yishbach without saying v'yas kol dama yishbach? Amar Rav Ashi says ahu lemuute shirayim shebetzavar behema. According to Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, that pasuk simply excludes the remainder in the neck of the animal. That actually is considered to be pushed off. That's considered that you would pour that down the amma. You would pour that down the drain. Again, that's going to go to Nachal Kidron. And Rashi explains Lamala. Again, if it says above in the pasuk, but Parsha, earlier in the Parsha, Homer, it says B'si or Nasi. This is talking about the carbon of the seir, the goat, which is brought by the nasi, b'shiyore hadam. So by the remainder of the blood, it says v'as damo yishpoch v'loksiv kol damo. It says you pour the blood. It doesn't say all the blood. And then lamata below b'chatas yachid, by talking about the chatas of an individual, who omer v'as kol damo yishpoch. It says kol v'hein yishpoch and liam. Again, they're poured to the amma, to the drain. The kosa osach eschaveru dichoy. Again, if it's poured to the amma, that's dichoy. One cup makes the other cup dichoy. And finally, Rashi says lemuute shirayim shabetzaver behema. Again, according to Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, it comes to exclude the shirayim, the remainder in the neck of the behema. The Shinui Nuschos changes the gears here to she'ein nasin shirayim, that they are not considered shirayim al yedei hadam haneskabel, through the blood that was received, and therefore v'yishbechu la'ama, therefore they're poured it down to the amma, down the drain, again because they're considered to be dichoy, as we explained. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said kibel hakosher v'nasan l'pasul, if a kosher kohen received the blood and then gave it over to someone who was disqualified, so then you return it to the kosher. And the Mishnah went on to say two other cases: if it was in the left hand, you return it to the right hand. If it was in a kli chol, a mundane vessel, you return it to a kli kodesh, to a vessel that is holy. And the Gemara says with tzrich, it's necessary to teach all three cases. Di'ashmin on pasul, because let's say the Mishnah only taught us a case of a disqualified individual. Hav amina, one might have thought, my pasul, what does it mean an individual is disqualified? It means tameh. It just means the person is tameh. To chazi la'avoda sibor, as we've said earlier, a tameh person sometimes can do the avoda in situations of a tzibor, in situations of community, so maybe it's not as strict. Avol smol lo, but maybe by the left hand, no, we wouldn't be so lenient. V'yashmin on smol, and if it only taught us the left hand, the islay hechsheira b'yom hakippur man yom kippur, we're lenient in some scenarios to use the left hand. Avol klei chol lo, but if it was a mundane vessel, no. V'yashmin on klei chol, and if it only taught us a mundane vessel, mishum dechazu lekadushinu, because a mundane vessel can be sanctified. Avol hanach emalo, but those other cases I would say no. So tzricha, that's why it's necessary to teach all of the cases. Rashi explains it's necessary to teach that there is a solution to return it to the proper place. The chazi la'avoda sibor, a tameh is fit to do the avoda in community situations. Could go in tameh, for example, a tameh person, the chazi lechatchila b'tzibor. Lechatchila is fit to do avoda b'tzibor hilkach gabe yachid. Therefore, one could say that by an individual, ika takanta b'chazar, that you'd have the solution of returning it. And biyom hakippurim, the left hand can be used on Yom Kippur. Natalas hamachde biyamino v'sakaf b'smoli. You would take the spoon in the left hand. And the Gemara continues and asks, v'lahavale dichoy, but in all of these cases, why don't we apply the rule of dichoy? Again, it was pushed off. Once something is pushed off, there's no solution. Rashi says, v'nahave dichoy dohanira v'nidcha, because it was able to be used and then it was pushed off from being used. V'amai islay takanta b'chazara. Why is there this solution by chazara, by returning it again to the proper individual, to the proper hand, to the proper vessel? And the Gemara continues, Amar le Ravina le Ravashi. Ravina said to Ravashi, Hachi Amar Rav Yirmiyah midifti mishmei de Rava. This is what Rav Yirmiyah from Difti said in the name of Rava. Hamoni, who is the author of our Mishnah? Chanan HaMitzri. The author of our Mishnah is Chanan HaMitzri. The lesle dechuyin. He doesn't hold of the concept of dechuyin. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brayso, Chanan HaMitzri Omer. Chanan HaMitzri says, Afilu dam bekos, even the blood in the cup, maybe chaveru mezaveg lo, he could bring his companion and pair up in that fashion. And Rashi explains, Afilu dam soyer hanasa bifnim. This is talking about An Yom Kippur. There was a soyer hanasa bifnim, and then there was the seir hamishtalech, the goat that was sent to Azazel. So even the blood of the seir hanasa bifnim, and it said bekos, even the dam is in a cup, umeis hamishtalech, and then the seir hamishtalech died. So really you would think that it would be pushed off, this blood that's in the cup, but lo nidcha hadam, that blood is not pushed off. Elamevi seir acher umezaveg lahadam, you bring another goat and you make that the accompanying goat for the blood. Vekasher hadam lematanosav v'zeh yishtalach, and again the dam, the blood, will be kosher for its applications, and this other goat will be sent away. And Rashi continues and explains, V'loshon afilu, now the language of afilu that Chanan HaMitzri uses over here, even the blood in the cup, we say is not pushed off. The nakat, the reason why he chooses that language of afilu, mishum deshlosha machlukas bedavar, the reason is because this is actually a three-way machlokas. Ikol amandamer, there's one opinion that says, afilu bale chayim nidachim, even the living animals can be pushed off. The Katani, because it taught, v'im mishehigrel, if after they drew the lottery, meis echad mehen, one of them died, yavi shnaim, you have to bring two other animals, v'yagrel and then you do the lots again, the lottery again. Whatever was remaining gets pushed off. Then there's a second opinion. Maybe you bring the companion without having to do any drawing of lots. The because Balei are not pushed off. It's not ma'akev, it's not required to draw the lots. Avoldam bekos, but according to that opinion, if the blood would already be in a cup, and then the mishtaleach would die, then the blood has to be poured out. The shchutin nidchin, because once it's slaughtered, it is pushed off. It cannot be used again. It's not fit anymore. And that's what Chanan is coming. Chanan HaMitzri is coming and saying, afilu dam bekos, even if the blood is in the cup, you can again bring another animal to be the pair. And the Gemara continues with another answer why there isn't dichoy in the cases in our Mishnah. Rav Ashi says, Kol shebiyado, anything that it's possible to fix, lo have a dichoy. There we say that there is no concept of dichoy. Rashi explains shebiyado l'sakein lahachzir, something again that you could fix to return to the right place. Kihanach demasnisin, like these cases in the Mishnah. Avalahu demishtaleach ein biyado, but when it comes to the sir mishtaleach, there is no possibility of fixing. Mi yemar diyahavi leachrini, who says that he'll be able to give him another one, so it's not something that can be simply fixed, that can be simply rectified. But in this case, where it is simply rectified, so lo have a dichoy, it is not dichoy. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Shaya kevasi de Rav Ashi mistaber. Rav Shaya says it makes sense what Rav Ashi is saying, that if it's biyada, there's no dichoy. Because man shamatle de isle dechuyin, who's the Tana that holds of this concept of dichoy? Rav Yehuda, it's Rav Yehuda. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, V'yod Amar Rav Yehuda, further Rav Yehuda says, Nishpach Adam, if the blood spills, Yamas HaMishtaleach, again by the two goats on Yom Kippur, then the Sir HaMishtaleach has to die. Meis HaMishtaleach, let's say the Sir HaMishtaleach dies, Yishafech Adam, then you pour out the blood, that's the concept of dichoy. V'shaminon le, and yet we hear about Rabbi Yehuda Damar that he says, Kol shebiyado lo have a dichoy, that if there's a possibility of fixing it, it's biyado, so then there is no dichoy. Where do we see that? The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Kosechar hayemamali midam hataroves. This is talking about by Korban Pesach. There would be one cup that was filled from blood mixed from all various Korban Pesachs. V'zorko zrika achas keneged hayesod, and he would do one zrika, one throwing keneged hayesod, corresponding to the yesod of the mizbeach, the base of the mizbeach. And so Shema Mino, you see from that statement of Rabbi Yehuda, Kol shebiyado lo have a dichoy, that if it's biyado to fix, so it's not dichoy. And the Gemara says Shema Mino, indeed we see that this is the case. And Rashi explains, again, the Mishnah in Yuma, Rabbi Yehuda said, Yomis HaMishtaleach, so then the Mishtaleach has to be left to die if the blood spills, the Idchile, because again, it's pushed off. V'yavi Shnayim Acherim, you have to bring two other animals. And then the Braisa Midam HaTarovis, the Braisa is talking about Korban Pesach, they filled one cup with blood of mixture, Shel Psachim, of various Korban Pesachs. And Zorko Zrika Achas Kedin Pesach, they do this Zrika following the law of Korban Pesach, one Zrika, Keneged HaYesod, corresponding to the Yesod, the base of the Mizbeach. What does that mean? Lafuke Karen Dromus Mizrachis. That essentially just excludes the southeastern corner of the Mizbeach. There was no Yesod over there. Kedamrinu Lekamon, like we say later on, Shem Nishbach Damo Shel Echad Mehen Al Yedei Shein Rabim V'Nivholim Lasos and Nimtza Kosem Machshir. The idea was, let's say the blood of one of the Korban Pesach spilled because there was a lot of people and they were in a rush to do it. So this cup, which had a whole mixture of blood, would be Machshirit. Shari Kula Muravim Bo. Essentially everything, all the blood was mixed up in it. V'imi Shum Di'arev B'Dam Hatamsis. Now, if you're going to say that there's an issue that it's mixed up with dam hatamsis essentially is the blood that is not the sole blood, so that's not kosher blood. Amrinan lekamon, we're going to say later on, Rabbi Yehuda l'taimir, Rabbi Yehuda follows his reasoning. Diamar ein dam evatel dam. He says that one kind of blood does not nullify another kind of blood. V'lo amrinan idchile behesarvu. We don't say that it's pushed off because it was mixed. Holo v'yado l'osfo. Again, since it's possible to gather it up, so here you have a situation of biyado, there's a solution, and so since there's a solution, you can gather it up. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says we can use that solution, and we don't say idchile, we don't say that it's pushed off. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, returning to what we just said above. Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, Kosechad hayememali midam hatarovis. There was one cup that he filled from the dam hatarovis, the blood that was all mixed up. Shem yishafech echad mehem. That way, if one of the bloods got spilled out, nimtza shehu machshiro, this would end up making it kosher. Amru lo Rabbi Yehuda. They said to Rabbi Yehuda, the sages said to Rabbi Yehuda, V'halolo neskabel bekli. But how could you use blood that was never received in a vessel? But the Gemara says, Mino Yadi, how do they know that it wasn't received in a vessel? What kind of question is this against Rabbi Yehuda? What they were asking was, if you're going to take this blood, fill up this blood from the blood that's on the floor, maybe that blood was not received in a vessel. Amar Lohen, he said to them, and Rashi explains, this blood that spilled, lo neskavel b'kli, it wasn't received in a vessel. Hechi kosher, how can it be kosher? The halacha is that if it spilled from the neck to the floor, vasaf, when it's gathered up, puzzle, it's disqualified. The Gemara then asked, Mino Yodi Rabbanan Shalom Neskavel, how did the Rabbanan know it wasn't received in a vessel? This is not actually an incident. It's just a svara, it's just a line of reasoning. There's a concern that maybe the blood of one of them spilled. And so Rashi continues, Shemalo Neskavel, what they were asking is, maybe it was not received in a vessel. V'nimsa Zorik Dam Puzzle, isn't there a concern that the person is going to be throwing dam that is puzzle, that is disqualified? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Hey Amid Aleph.